welcome to episode 28 of God Save the King, the world's greatest monarchist live show. If I sound a bit less energetic to this episode, I kind of got to come up with topics for a guest, Darth Killhoon.
Hello.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. So I'm Darth Killhoon from the Darth Killhoon channel. I admit I'm not the most active channel when it comes to content, but I'm a Roman Catholic monarchist in the United States military. So it makes it very awkward when I talk to a lot of other people about who the hell I am. But yeah, that's my basic synopsis.
Oh, yeah, okay. So you're Roman I mean, I knew that. I knew you were Roman Catholic. I'm Eastern Orthodox.
We're
But
gonna get schism territory here.
I mean, that's something I actually would be interested to talk about. What are your thoughts on like the fact that a lot of Roman Catholics in the U.S. are a lot more liberal leaning than like Protestants? It seems like in the U.S. that a lot of the like more right leaning people are not like Catholic like they used to be. Like the Catholics used to be very right wing back in the 50s and the 60s. They were on the front lines of the anti-porn crusades, the making the Hays Code, I think it's called, for Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get this more from a sociology than I do from just looking at, unfortunately, my own cohort in the United States, because the Catholic Church has always been the minority in the United States, and the Protestants have always been the majority. So by that, like literally the Ku Klux Klan and these other like Protestant organizations are extremely anti-Catholic. So we've kind of had to become this opposition force within the nation. And because of that, a lot of Catholics initially drifted into, initially the Republican Party because they were kind of the minority party back then, but then slowly shifted to the Democrats with Kennedy, mostly just as a defensive reaction against the Protestants, I'd say. And then it just kind of got sunk in later on with just because we were unfortunately affiliated with that camp, and it infested most of our liturgy that aren't properly catechismed well enough. So a lot of them fall into heresies without their even knowledge about it. I'm glad though that like the traditional Catholic sphere is actually a lot in the United States, and a lot of us are firm rejectors of both the conservative and the liberal platforms in the United States because we view them both as evil and both as classical liberal. And if you know anything about the Roman pontiffs, they've always been, well, maybe except for Francis, very anti-liberal in the Lockean terms of liberalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all really what came into conflict in the United States with Catholicism versus you have a very Anglo-Protestant form of I mean, I wouldn't really call it Lockean liberalism. I mean, I don't think the founders really associate themselves with Locke or any of those. They view themselves more as I guess it would really actually a lot of the revolutionaries. A lot of them actually did harbor reactionary tendencies. Like they wanted George III to rule directly over the colonies and not have Parliament involved. They also on 3 separate occasions attempted to install monarchs over the United States. I think they really just settled for I would call America originally, which was a good system. Like aristocratic republicanism is not a bad system of government. That was really America's downfall in the 1920s, universal suffrage for men instead of just landowners.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, but I'm also a skeptic of aristocratic republics, because unless they turn into a monarchy, they degenerate. Like Rome, they were degenerating until Caesar brought an end to the republic and brought in the empire. Mostly with Augustine, though. He did most of those heavy lifting reforms. And the Roman Empire was rejuvenated for another 300 years because of uh, Augustine. I mean, that's Augustine. So that's why I'm very skeptical of even aristocratic republics. Because I just know the history of them.
Yeah, I mean, republics last around. America's coming to the end of the. I would say it's Republican life cycle. It's. I mean, people like to say it's like, oh, the left is the ascendant, and it's like they don't really have any real power. I mean, they have power, but they have power that isn't capable of enforcing itself because it worships weakness, it worships depravity. That's really why they're pushing all these things in schools. Like, no one is naturally a leftist. Natural existence of leftism is contradictory. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
no. I mean, I think someone made the point once that if you have no moderation on a website that discusses things like politics, it always inevitably shifts to the right because the leftists have terrible arguments.
Mm-hmm. Well, leftism, like whether you're talking about like liberalism, Marxism, anarchism, it always is predicated on rationalism and goes against the basic human nature, which human nature is fundamentally irrational. Like it's irrational why the family is the building block of society, why these systems of organized religion are always the most powerful forces in a society. But then you introduce rationalism and it starts getting people skepticizing about everything, and then they degenerate everything. Like liberals will initially try to say, oh, we're trying to, that stuff is still allowed, like, say, religion and various forms of art and stuff, but you always see over centuries the degradation of everything from architecture to social bonds, um, etc., just because of that liberal mindset of rationalism.
Yeah, I think John Neville Figgis, he didn't go into like that, but he went into how it's actually easier to argue against liberals who don't predicate the pre-existing existence of rights on God. It's like, yeah, it's actually much easier to argue against them because they have really no actual presupposition for the things they believe. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no real
Oh,
reason that rights should exist if you take a strictly rationalist perspective. Like, rights shouldn't exist if you're taking a strictly Darwinian perspective. You shouldn't respect anybody's rights. You should just do whatever secures yourself the most resources for your future offspring, your in group. Like liberalism itself all of its presuppositions are based on God exists. He gives you these rights. These rights are it's bestowed by God. But now that they don't believe in God anymore, they just say, oh, well, it's nonsense human rights.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's ultimately the weakness of liberalism, is because they initially make their arguments with God, then you get like the French Revolutionary school in of liberalism, and then suddenly it's all about the cult of rationalism, which was literally like they were worshiping rationalism like it was a deity. And I think it was Robespierre that was like the head of this new cult of rationalism that lasted for a few years in France. Um, but yes, it just degenerated, and because you get away from the idea that God is the ultimate authority, and when you get rid of the ultimate authority, you get back to the primitive authority of might makes right. So in reality, like the rights are only as much as the state is willing to give you, very much a Rousseauian school of thought, where Rousseau would write about the only rights that are guaranteed is by what the state gives you, essentially. And so, yeah, essentially, you aren't entitled to any rights, and that's what the atheist school of liberalism has always to degenerate to.
Yeah, I only honestly find it funny that like all these people like uh that call themselves classical liberals, or and then they're all like homosexuals, and these people's like America wasn't founded on Christianity. It's like if you would have said to any of the classical liberals, I don't believe in God, I'm gay, they would have called you a sinner and then called you stupid for being an atheist. Like that was actually the like being an atheist in the like 17 1600s. That was a way of someone calling you really dumb. Like that's what the word means. It means that you're an idiot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why like cults like Freemasonry popped up, where it's like you still have to believe in some form of a deity, but not necessarily the Christian God. But then it was ultimately a rationalistic cult where you have to rationalize God, and that birthed the school of liberalism. Like most of the founding fathers were card-carrying Masons, and they
Well,
developed
no,
the
no,
well
only actually a
the
few of them were. Like I think
well, most
Washington
most of the leader
was.
ones were.
Well, no, not all of them. Thomas Jefferson was not a Mason. So only some of them were. Like only Washington and I think Franklin were, and one other. John Adams was not. John
Franklin.
Adams was and there was only three of them who were Masons. John Adams was a very devout Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think like this whole the founders were Masons. I was talking to a guy recently says it doesn't really matter what they were. It's the society they created. For a long time, America was a very prosperous functioning. That's nothing. That's nothing disturbing. That's just one of
Yeah,
my room. That's just one of my roommates yelling at a cat that constantly is harassing the other cats in the house.
I have my cat, but he might as well be my cat. He's my folks' cat, a Russian blue. He's really chill and good at mousing, and he's also canceled from cat shows now because he's a Russian breed. Uh, that's just my little rant. But going back to masonry, it's like if you look at like the various Masonic lodges, like they came up with the whole concept of the liberal revolution like years before the American one did, and it's very convenient that a few of the founders were discussing these issues in the Masonic lodges years before any revolution was considered. I just it's the coincidence is just a little too stark to ignore too. Even though yes, some of the founders were not Masons, like Adams and Hamilton and a few others.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the I don't think that's necessarily true because the founders' intent was originally to put King George on above the entirety of the United States, and then later
Mm-hmm.
Washington. And then actually there was one other plot. I think it was after
The
the whiskey
Prussian
rebel,
plot.
the Prussian plot, which actually was a real thing. So yeah, there was some.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was Masonic influences in the United States, but I think like the real more Masonic influences from like revolutionary liberalism really come into play in the French Revolution with the Rosicrucians.
Yeah, yeah, the Masons have had their hands in almost every revolution that has happened in the world. America less so, but France was the most stark. You can also go to like the various German revolutions and the Italian revolutions in the 1800s, and almost all of their major proponents were high level Masons. Then if you go to the Bolshevik Revolution, early on, there was actually a lot of Masons in there before Stalin got in there and purged a lot of them.
Yeah, there was other groups involved. Yeah, the whole uh, revolution, mainly in Russia, was mainly spurred on. Well, a lot of it was financed by extremely wealthy financiers, and the Rothschild banking dynasty, mainly to undermine the competition of the Trans-Siberian Railroad because they owned the Suez Canal, which undermined the legitimacy.
And also to
interest,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, it was, and really Russia was the last bastion of really reactionary thought. Like Peter III, actually, who was assassinated by Vladimir Lenin's older brother, actually killed Peter III. So it's funny that people like to bitch at people like Kim Jong Un for the whole family is traitors. Get rid of all of them, but there's some merit to that. Is in Leon, his brother later murdered the rest of the Romanov dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
That was really why they.
Yeah, in fact. Oh, go finish.
No, I wouldn't say anything.
Okay. Yeah, actually, my on my great grandmother's side, they were actually Crimean Germans. So they knew the Bolshevik Revolution very well, and I heard it, of course, secondhand from my grandfather. Just the atrocities by the Ukrainian Black and Red armies against the German populations within the Ukraine and the Don region and the Volga region. So that's why at least my great grandmother's family came to America, which married my great grandfather, which they were Bavarians that also lost their estates because of socialist revolutionaries in Bavaria after World War One. So I have a lot of family history with those revolutionaries at that time period.
Yeah, the Volga Germans, they were actually pretty much loyal to the last. That was actually General Wrangel was Volga German. He was the commander of the White Army during the entirety of the war. Well, no, they threw him out because he was being sensible and actually had a strategy to win the war. If it was up to
leave
him,
it to a German.
Well, weirdly, it was actually a lot of the Russian high command was actually German. Was German and Kazakh. It's like there was less Russians in the German. There was a good amount of Russians in the Russian high command, but there was a lot of weirdly non-Russians in the Russian high command during a lot of wars. It's like one time they had a German admiral, they had several German generals.
But there's also the Mad Baron himself, Ernst Sternberg.
Yes, he was German. It was actually Catherine the Great who allowed German settlement into the Crimean Peninsula and around the Volga regions of Russia. It was back when the term Eurasianism wasn't associated with weird occultic dumbasses, and it was actually associated with the idea of Europeanizing, taking European settlers and settling them in all the Asiatic parts of Russia.
Yeah, isn't that why there's still Germans in Uzbekistan these days?
That's where you get all these which is weird. Another thing Catherine the Great did is only Christians really. She started destroying a lot of the businesses of the non-Christians in Russia and promoting heavily Christianity. That's really why you get the slander of all the nonsense that she liked to. The whole horse thing that's nonsense. People repeat that as that never happened. None of these things are true. These are literally just slander of international capitalists, international capital who she was kicking out of the country at the time.
Yeah, I just label the term based on that, but getting rid of international capital. It's funny how you always see a war pop up shortly after the ruling whether it's a monarch or some other ruling caste, starts targeting international finance, and then a war pops up, and then they get deposed because of it. Like the same thing happened to the German emperor. If you actually read his memoirs and his account, like, he was starting to go after the Masons and international finance within Germany. And then conveniently, you see Archduke Franz Ferdinand assassinated and a great war pop off.
Yeah, a lot of people don't go into like the causes of World War One, and that's a lot of it. Really neglected subject on the dissident right is the causes of the First Great War, which was completely pointless. Like nothing really changed in Europe except several generations of Europeans died, and it was actually
the deposing of ancient monarchies as well.
Yep, the several Habsburgs, the Romanovs,
Hohenzollerns, Wittelsbach, Wesen. There's a lot of German houses. My family specifically Bavarian, so I have a special tie to the House of Wittelsbach myself.
Yeah, one of my good friends is the descendant, is the fifth in line for the if the Georgian throne ever was restored, his title would mean something.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's always a possibility, especially in the former USSR, where monarchism is actually like some more popular than in the West.
Yeah, a lot of countries. Poland has a monarchist party, so does Serbia. The Confederation of the Polish Crown.
Hungary literally has Habsburgs in the government. Yeah, it's pretty. I honestly see it as a miracle. I mean, technically, you can also count Poland as a kingdom now because they crowned Jesus the King of Poland, but I think it's honestly just a step towards an actual monarchy in Poland, because Portugal did the same thing around the, I think it was 1400s, where officially Mary was the monarch of Portugal, and the king of Portugal was just the regent for centuries.
Yeah, Portugal, the tiny the country it's smaller than most U.S. states, but somehow ruled most of South America.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, one of the shortest-lived empires of Brazil to ever be. But at least the Brazilian imperial house is actually politically active, which is it's one of the rarities in the world where the royal and imperial houses are actually active in their own countries.
Well, no, because the Emperor of Brazil was also used to be the King of Portugal, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was a shared crown, even though Brazil's like 10 times, it's almost 1,000 times the size of Portugal.
Yeah, no, it's one of those funny things you can just look back on history. The colony surpasses the homeland. Kind of like the United States, but unfortunately, we're a cringe republic still.
Well, yeah, I mean, the really short-lived Mexican Empire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Habsburg claimant. I forget if if Emperor Maximilian even has any heirs left.
He does. There's two trains of thought. One is the Habsburg claimant, and the other one is the descendant of I think his name is like he's like the emperor of the Aztec emperor's descendants.
I mean, I probably wouldn't want to see the
I think he's actually Catholic. I think he's Catholic, so you'd have a Catholic Aztec empire.
That'd be interesting. It's funny just how the Catholic Church converted that entire region. Funny thing, you know, do you know the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe?
No.
Uh,
We
okay, so but yeah, the Our Lady of Guadalupe. So, the Virgin Mary, she appeared before some. I mean, they weren't called Mexicans back then, but like peasants in what would become Mexico, and told them that the church was coming. That these are the sacraments that I'm preparing you for the coming of the Spanish that are going to bring the church with them. So when the Spanish actually arrived, like 40 years later, and they discovered these various villages in the middle of today's Mexico that they were all practicing the sacraments. They all had mass, and the Spanish were just perplexed. And then they asked like the locals, like, "Well, how did you get the sacraments? Like, no Catholic priest ever came over." And they said, "Oh, well, this lady that looked like perfectly Mary came to us and told told the sacraments." It's one of the most amazing stories.
Well, that's not necessarily true. That there was actually an Orthodox monk who did travel to North America, in the, I think, I think like the 6th century. Of his icon, Saint something, the Navigator. That's why he's a saint. He was a famous explorer monk who traveled on a ship to the United States in the 8th century.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about that one. It's like
Well, that was before the
you get the
schisms, but he's
Catholic
also
and Orthodox in the same room, and well,
we're
yeah,
gonna
he's also a
both make
Catholic saint.
claims. Yeah, we're gonna both make claims that the New World is rightfully belongs to each other, which is funny because Orthodoxy in America is. I mean, people like to say Catholics are a minority. We're a minority of a minority. I think there's like 2% of the population, if that. Of
Yeah, yeah. I kind of take the like the Catholic Church like still recognizes all of your bishops as legitimate. So I just like to say apostolic. I'm a apostolic united. That's just generally my stance on the whole schism. Like we should kind of just get over that, guys. And we're all apostolic except for the Anglicans. They are in heresy. They're the only apostolic guys that are in heresy. And then
yeah.
Especially when you see the Anglos appointing female bishops, it's like that's an oxymoron, guys. Don't you know?
Well, I think it was like during the Protestant Reformation, the Anglicans tried to get in communion with us as well. We just told them no. We fully told them no. We also Orthodoxies in most. Well, I don't think it's no. I don't know if we have an Orthodox Church of. We wouldn't make an Orthodox Church of Italy because we would just consider the Pope as the Patriarch of Italy. So it'd be actually kind of presumptuous to actually. I think there is parishes in Italy, but it'd be presumptuous to say that the Pope doesn't have the authority to rule over Italy. We just say, okay, that'd be the presumption that the Patriarch of Rome is just the Pope.
I mean, technically, the Catholic Church also does have patriarchs in it. Like, there's a Patriarch of Venice, off the top of my head, and there's like 18 others that I don't know exactly where they're from. I think Eritrea is one. Armenia, I think, is another one. Egypt, because the Copts, Armenians, and Eritreans came back into communion with Rome, like actually fairly recently. Eritrea was like 2008.
Wasn't that who was before Francis?
Benedict the 16th. Yeah, it's the 16th.
Yeah, and
I was
that's
also a
actually
young boy too. So
that was actually something Benedict like people like to blame him for the sexual scandal, but he was the main guy who was throwing all of the child molested priests out of the Catholic Church and defrocking them and telling them to get lost. I mean, it's funny how when a conservative pope is in the is the
Is
head
the
of
reigning pontiff?
the reigning pontiff, they like, oh, the child molestations, but now that Pope Francis doesn't do anything about that, they're like, it's not a problem
Pope,
anymore.
Pope Francis has actually been a bit more subtle, but he has been purging a lot of those elements. It just doesn't really get reported on because the left want to claim him as their pope and try to say he's not like a trad, but he does make a lot of like trad statements just behind the scenes, and he has fired a number of bishops for sex scandals and for turning a blind eye to it, and hundreds of priests have been sacked by Francis during his reign.
Yeah, I
So
mean, these people are like, oh, I love Pope Francis. Like, the Catholic Church hasn't really changed its position under Francis. Like, he says a lot of cringy liberal things, but most like the Catholic Church's stance on morality is still the same. It's that abortion is not allowed in the Catholic Church. Homosexuality is still not allowed in the Catholic Church. Like the positions, it's like, I don't know. There's this page on Facebook that I sometimes read. It's like progressive Orthodox Christians. I'm like, if you want homosexuals allowed in the church and abortion allowed in the church and feminism allowed in the church, then you don't want orthodoxy. You want all the vestments of
Protestantism.
orthodoxy without our orthodoxy. He's like, well, I really like how you guys do services. Feel free to go do that somewhere else. We don't care. I mean, we're gonna call you heretics, but we're just not gonna ignore you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a few minor heresies in the Orthodox Church, like the old calendarists and the old believers. There's not really any disagreements. It's just that you think a hand doing the sign of the cross with 3 fingers wouldn't be that much of it. Doing it with the whole hand instead of 3 fingers wouldn't be that much of an issue. But apparently, it created an entire small splinter faction of Orthodoxy. It's like you're like that's what you're gonna eat. Like the old calendarists are just like, we changed the calendar. We don't even we're not, I don't even think we're not in community with them. We're just like, we don't gonna use the other calendar. Like, yeah, okay, sure.
uh, yeah, that you see that. Well, that happens in the Roman world at least. You instead see like a different religious order form, like say the Benedictines, Franciscans, uh, Carthusians, etc. Like they're all just different like monastic and priestly orders that just have like slightly different practices. Not necessarily, they don't change the tradition, they just change like how they live their own lives and very subtle things that are still within communion.
Yeah, in Orthodoxy, we don't really have no one ever really decided like, none of the czars were like, yeah, go persecute the old calendars. It's like, we're just gonna ignore you. Do whatever.
Mm-hmm. I actually, whenever I like I come across like a socialist or a communist that claims that it's the best ideology ever, there's this great video by Vertigo Politics. He was initially one of like the alt-right or just dissident right YouTubers. Like he just kind of supported all dissident right movements, but he told essentially told the story of the massacre of the old believers in Russia, and it's just like, oh, so you think you guys are so great? Well, you guys would have just massacred this one group living in the hinterland because they were taking up space. It's like, yeah, you guys are so great.
Yeah, well,
And,
we didn't really. The reason Russia didn't ever persecute the old believers because there's not a disagreement. We're just like, they're just really, really devout Orthodox Christians. I think there's still communities of them in the U.S.
Isn't
old believer.
Dugan a old believer too?
No,
I heard.
Dugan is a weirdo occultist. I don't like Dugan. I've never liked the guy. He creeps me out. I don't like anybody who follows his philosophy. I don't. Yeah, always has
Okay.
creeped me out. I don't like the guy. It's he blames the entire world problems on like Anglo liberalism. I'm like, these ideas did not come out of the Anglo world. They came out of retarded postmodern German and French philosophers who were basically degenerates. I mean, someone actually said this. Like, I think it was Peter Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens' brother, Peter Hitchens, who's like a very devout Christian. But he said they don't want God to exist. It's really the postmodernists, is because their lifestyles are just straight up degenerate.
Yeah. What was I gonna say about that? Yeah, I just like when I'm on like
Uh,
AA's when I listen to like AA streams and stuff, like they always they at least have claimed that he's an old believer, so that's why I asked that. Um,
he is
but
not. He is
yeah.
he is very much a weirdo occultist. Like people who
Mhm.
think like Duggan's beliefs are so out of step with orthodoxy. I don't know why people in orthodoxy like the guy so much. Like he's fit. I think his beliefs are fucking psychotic. What he advocates for is it's just blaming other people for the results of just cultural Marxist degeneracy, postmodern French philosophers. I'm not saying all postmodernist philosophers are far left. There's far right postmodern philosophers, but the whole philosophy is just plainly lazy. Like
Mhm.
everything is lived experiences. I'm like, you can literally just argue that in circles. Like it's a circular logic argument.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, because then
I'm gonna have to
I can
go.
just like throw my. Oh,
I mean, sorry for them cutting this short. I have a friend's birthday party I have to go to.
okay. Oh yeah, it's been a
Uh,
nice short stream. Pray that you have
I'm not
good
trying.
Easter coming up.
Sorry about being rude.
Oh
I
no, I understand you have commitments.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, I pray that
we
you have a
can
good Easter. Yeah.
I same. I hope everyone when you go to church tomorrow, it's an important liturgy.
Go to an apostolic church of some type. Don't go to your cringe Protestants that are listening.
Yeah, I'll see everyone next week. I mean, Darth Killhoon, we can like do this. I should be more free in like 2 weeks if you want to do it again, so we can have a more in-depth episode where I actually come up with topics and have my co-hosts.
Hmm. Yeah. Depending on what I'm doing in 2 weeks, I really don't know what I'm doing honestly week from week. So I'll just stay in touch.
Stay in touch.